I kicked off an investigation of Big Pharma's tax practices, the dodges and tricks these hugely profitable multinational companies use to winnow down their tax bills. This was not very long after Trump's first tax breaks for corporations went into effect. My Democratic colleagues on the Finance Committee and I wanted to know exactly how sweet a deal Trump gave the biggest drug companies. What changes needed to be made to ensure these corporations paid a fair share? So far in the course of my investigation, I've released information on the tax practices of 5 major drug companies: AbbVie, Abbott Laboratories, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Merck. The questions that I asked these companies were not very complicated. Essentially, what I asked came down to questions like, how big were your sales? Where did you make them? Where did you report your profits? Where did you stick your intellectual property? Did you actually pay taxes? Last year, I expanded my investigation with an inquiry to the company Pfizer. Pfizer initially resisted, but my staff and I were not going to let up. Finally, the company provided some answers to our questions. For example, we're going to get into those issues now, and I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a memorandum outlining records of my investigation relating to Pfizer's tax avoidance schemes, which will also be available immediately on the Finance Committee's website. I ask unanimous consent to have the report entered in the record now.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through these findings and discuss why they're so important. And I'm very pleased to be joined by several of my colleagues who are also outraged about this tax dodging. Here's the upshot, Mr. President. My investigation has found that Pfizer carried out what could be the largest tax dodging scheme in the history of Big Pharma. The U.S. is the largest market for Pfizer's products. In 2019, the company sold $20 billion worth of drugs to American patients. Now, if you're following along on this discussion, you might be hoping to hear that Pfizer paid a reasonable rate of tax on those profits. I've got bad news for you and the American people. In that same year, Pfizer reported zero, not 1 red cent, in taxable U.S. profits. Through various tricks and games, Pfizer was able to shift 100% of its U.S. profits to foreign tax havens. This means that Pfizer dodged billions of dollars in federal income tax on its U.S. drug sales. There is every reason to believe it continues to do so. And thanks to the tax law Trump and Republicans passed in 2017, Pfizer doesn't need to keep the money stashed overseas. Pfizer can take this cash and pocket it with tax dodging schemes and turn it into stock buybacks, dividends, executive compensation. The list goes on. Now, there's an additional matter that's so disturbing. The company appears to be keeping some of its tax schemes hidden from view with what has been described to me as a confidential arrangement with the governments of Puerto Rico and Singapore. It's enough to leave you slack-jawed. So this is a Senate investigation that will have a direct impact on tax legislation, and Pfizer is hiding relevant tax information behind non-disclosure agreements. So, colleagues, this is the 6th Big Pharma company where my investigation has found a staggering level of tax dodging. And these rip-offs don't happen by osmosis. They happen because Republicans have allowed them to happen. With the tax law they passed back in 2017, Republicans delivered to Big Pharma a tax break of more than 40%. From 2014 to 2016, the industry paid 19.6% on average. In 2019 and 2020, it paid 11.6%. Now, reasonable people watching at home might be thinking about how Republicans always claim to be worried about deficits and debt. Surely those Republicans would dial back what they did in 2017 and ask these huge profitable corporations to pay a little bit more to ease our fiscal challenges. If you think that's the case, wrong. So I want to bring my colleagues into this discussion momentarily, and I'll close by looking at the big picture as the Congress moves forward with this debate on taxes, health, child hunger, and more. Republicans are in control of the Congress and the White House, and they have locked Democrats out of the discussion. Somewhere here on Capitol Hill, there's a group of Republicans meeting right now behind closed doors, quietly planning the outline of their gigantic bill. Nobody in that room is talking about how to protect people who work for a living or how to get more fairness in the economy. The discussion they're having comes down to how big the handouts are going to be for billionaires and multinational corporations. How many tens of millions of Americans they're going to kick off Medicaid to pay for it? How many millions of kids are going to go hungry? How many hundreds of thousands of workers are going to lose their jobs? Republicans are doubling down on a broken system. And if you want to see that system in action, read our report, because you couldn't find a better example than Big Pharma's tax dodging. These are huge corporations that rake in enormous profits in U.S. sales because they charge astronomical prices in America. And then their stables of lawyers and accountants get to work on a whole bunch of fancy financial wizardry, taking advantage of loopholes and rip-offs planted by Republican lawmakers. Suddenly, the record profits get shipped overseas. Often the factories get shipped overseas. The jobs get shipped overseas. And the companies aren't paying anything close to a fair share of taxes. Typical Americans who pay tax out of every paycheck get ripped off. Republicans are not going to fix this broken, unfair system. In fact, they're gearing up to give tax-dodging corporations like these and their billionaire shareholders even bigger handouts. It's a scam. It's a rip-off on a national scale. The American people see it for what it is. We're going to keep calling it out, Senate Democrats, because this must not stand. So I'm very appreciative that my colleagues are joining me here on the floor. We have a very important member of the Senate Finance Committee to start, Senator Whitehouse, and I want to send this over to him. Senator Whitehouse.